Okay, let's talk about Kazimtani. All right. So Kazimtani, we know what it is. It's a national hygiene program, which is a national initiative designed to cushion the most vulnerable but able-bodied citizens living in informal settlements from the effects and the response strategies of COVID-19 pandemic. Right. So this was one specific. We've been talking about, the government is to cushion, offer social protection. And one of the responses that the government came up with was this one. It said, we're going to have a cash transfer program to the youth, but you don't just want to send money to the youth without engaging them in something and keeping them busy. So one of these initiatives was now what they call the National Hygiene Program, called Kazimtani. And if you just think about it, initially it sounded like, what the government wants to do is engage the youth in cutting grass and collecting garbage and clearing our sewerage, and then paying them something at the end of the day. Of course, when we see the implementation of it in various areas, you see, okay, there are some who are involved in building roads and some who are involved in other civil works around the country. But the issue of how much they receive has also been contentious.
There's the issue of what is slated for them to receive and what they actually receive.
Yes.
Yes.
The gap between what the government has said,
what is documented,
vis-a-vis what they're receiving and when they're receiving it, also becomes an issue. A couple of weeks back, we saw some youth who had barricaded Mombasa Road and they were complaining that they have not been paid. We've also seen, these kind of protests coming from other quarters, other parts of the country, and it's either delayed payment or also how much is somebody receiving. Some of them complaining that they're receiving as low as 900 shillings. And yet, on record, it's more than that. So let's talk to the person who's in charge of this program. And this is the PS for Housing and Urban Development, Charles Hinga. The State Department of Housing is actually the one that is overall in charge of this project. And it's overall the one that's managing this. Let's talk to the PS. Good morning, Bona PS.
Hi, morning, Eric. How are you?
Salama kabisa. And thank you very much for joining us in the Situation Room.
It's a pleasure.
Let's get off from the very beginning. Kazi Mtaani and what Kazimtani is meant to be.
Thank you so much, Eric, and good morning to the listeners. If we recall around March when the first cases of COVID hit our shores, the Ministry of Health came up with certain protocols. And if you recall, the first one was we stay at home. Now, that specific protocol had certain impact, especially in the urban areas, because majority of our urban area people, they work in the informal sector, the Juakali sectors, SMEs, and most of them are actually they're mainly waged. So they eat actually what they make for the day. The effect of those protocols was that in urban areas there were many families that had to almost make a choice between dying from hunger or dying from COVID. And there was a lot of so many cases of people who went to bed without food. And that's how we decided to come up with a program. So we had different options. We had an option of just identifying these vulnerable people who have fallen back into vulnerability because of the protocols and send them money. But we thought that we can kill several birds with one stone. One is that we put food on the table, and number two, we also get some public good out of it. And this public good was based on the fact that COVID requires high standards of hygiene. And again, the same people that we're talking about, when we talk about social distancing, it is not possible to do social distancing in an informal settlement, in a slum like Nakuru. When you go everywhere, they don't have proper garbage disposal. The drainages are either non-existent or wherever they are clogged, and there's a mixture between human waste and all the other ways. So there's so many challenges such that if this pandemic was to break into this informal settlement, then the challenge was going to be much, much bigger. And that's how National Hygiene Program was started.
As youth from across the country then began to sign up for this, what was it? Anybody who basically came in and said, "I'm in a position that I can do this work, whether I have lost a job or whether I didn't have one previously"? Was there any kind of prohibition for who then was able to come in?
Oh yes, there was. So we used the Nyumba Kumi structures, which the first thing that is important to understand about Nyumba Kumi structure is that you're supposed to know your neighbor. And it is at that level, and there was wazees of Nyumba Kumi, and it is in those structures where you're able to know that your neighbor did not have food last night because she's what we call those mama fua, and she cannot, no one now is allowing, these ladies who do some of these domestic chores into their homes, and they had no food on the table. So that's how we came up with the Nyumba Kumi structures, working with the chiefs, working with the county commissioners to help us identify who are these people that have been greatly affected, especially in the informal settlements.
We have a number of, just as an example, even calls that we've had in here. Now the issues surrounding payments, issues surrounding how all of this, even reduction in fees, the schedule with which these individuals would be paid. And there seem to be some contentious issues now surrounding all of this. Are you aware of exactly what is going on around the country and the problems that some people are having when it comes to, number one, being paid? And unfortunately, some of the corruption that seems to be taking place within this program already.
All right. So the first thing is that the first phase was supposed to be a pilot phase, which we did in 8 counties and 33 informal settlements. Now, at that point, we were paying them in Nairobi. We were paying what is called the minimum wage prescribed by the Labor Act. And it was $650 in places like Nairobi and $616 in other areas. Now, sometimes it's nice to use statistics. Of course, did we have challenges of non-payment? Absolutely. How did those come up? One is we are using mobile money to pay them. Now, we have a deal that we got with Safaricom, where they wrote off the fees on government side and they wrote off the fees on the recipient side. So if it is $650, you're going to get $650. Now, so the first thing that you have to do is that you must have an active mobile money line. But there were several challenges with some of these youths. Number one, they have got some loans with either these loan Shylock, with Fuliza and all those things. And what happens is that if you have a loan and you get paid, it gets deducted.
Right.
So what they did was that they, a few of them, less than 1% actually, they used somebody else's number. Now, that poses several challenges, because if I pay you using somebody else's number, you will come back later and tell me you never paid me, right?
Yeah.
So what we had to do was to pay, first of all, those who had no credential issues. Guess what? In phase 1, that was 99.82%. So you're talking about 0.18% that had these challenges.
Okay.
But then, so for you to overcome that, there is a process, right? There is a process whereby you have got to give us a form that says, I am authorizing you to pay this number.
Okay.
So that later you don't come back and claim those type of issues that you've not been paid. So again, you're talking about a very small percentage. Now, in the first phase, what we saw though was that there was a great need. In a place like Madare, for example, on the first day, there was like, I don't know, Nairobi, we had about 12,000 youths who were engaged in phase 1. We had over 30,000 young kids just rock up on day 1 because they wanted work.
Right.
All right, and they started to riot. The other one now was there were some elements of criminality that came in, and some people were arrested actually. And those who were arrested, who were burning tires on Mombasa Road, actually turned out they were not even members of the Kazimtani. So again, it's the usual shenanigans that come in, right? Come phase two. When phase two then began after the successful rollout of phase one, now we had to go to every county in this country. Now, that is an enormous task. That is almost close to 283,000 young people who are engaged. Now, for you to be able to do that, we had to move away from manual processes now to more automated, just because of the sheer volumes. We needed a place where I can be able to see that you've clocked in and clocked out, because the other time it is every morning you're signing a manual register. And when we get that manual register, that's what we have to process for payment. And on one hand, I've got to make sure that I'm paying the right people. And then on the other hand, I've got to make sure that I pay the young people on time.
Yeah.
So we moved to automation, and there's a clock in and there's a clock out. The second thing that we did with phase two, based actually on the youth themselves, was in Old Town Mombasa and Kisumu and so on and so many places. The young people themselves, because they say that we are our brother's keeper. We want to see how do you expand this program. Some of them even say, look, we're happy to take even 300 shillings a day, all right, so that you can be able to bring more people on board.
Right.
So when His Excellency saw the success of the first phase in the sense that there were a lot more youths engaged, crime rates had come significantly down in these informal settlements. The program was expanded, and we were given 10 billion to run this program for 6.5 months. So we sat down and we said, this is a social protection program rather than an employment program. So we moved from the 650 to 455 shillings across the board. And that's how we managed to get our numbers of 283,000 young. And so then we split them into shifts. Shift one is 11 days. Then you take a pause. Then another group comes in for 11 days. So that, again, we're able to stretch the shilling, bearing in mind what I have just said. The most important part is people need to put food on the table.
So when you talk about this, the kind of challenges that you're going through at the implementation phase, some of them you could call teething problems, and government is very good at using the words teething problems when people's livelihoods are impacted. But also at the same time, I'm just thinking, so 10 billion shillings has been earmarked. It's going to take 6.5 months, and this is a social protection program. But already from statistics of last year's census and all, you already know the number of youth that we have in the country. Already from all other government structures, it's possible for you to have known the number of youth who would have benefited from this program in whatever part of the country. So that period where the youth are telling you, you know what, we are receiving this amount of money, but when we go back home, we are feeling like, we have been favored, and therefore that's why it's maybe the youth are even saying, you know what, I'm willing to take less just so that everybody else can feel participatory in this particular project. That, to me, sounds like a government that was rolling out a program, but it had not thought through the entire process and the impact of it.
That is far from correct, Rick, because first of all, let's do some reality check. When you did the census in 2019, we didn't have COVID. World over, and remember, even the first time when these protocols were put in, we were not told to put face masks. Again, it's a global thing, because it caught everybody in the world flat-footed.
Yeah.
And so, in this case, this is not a case of letting the perfect be the enemy of good. This is a process whereby you have got to make decisions, and those decisions, are impacting people every day. Let me give you an example, Eric. There is a lady that I met in Nakuru. This lady, herself and her husband, are in that daily hustle type of work. They have 8 kids, right, and live in a small shack in Nakuru. The lady wakes up every morning and goes to South B. Well, that's where she used to make her daily wages through cleaning in South.
Right.
They even shut the gates if you know Golden Gate, Plainsview, they shut the gate.
Yeah.
And they sit outside the whole day waiting for that phone call to come. And when that phone call does not come, she goes back home and sits with the husband, who also, works in industrial areas, but we've been told this is not essential service, so stay at home.
Yep.
Their issue was a matter of life and death. Their issue, and in urban areas specifically, because in rural areas, people wouldn't die so much of hunger. But in urban areas, people were facing starvation. What some of the cases that they were saying is, look, we have to do a balloting out of our 8 kids to choose who is going to eat tonight and who is going to go to bed hungry. Yeah. There was a case of a lady in Mombasa who boiled stones. These are real issues, right? So, you can criticize it was not perfect. Did it cover everybody? Absolutely not, because the need was much bigger. But there's a couple of things that are very important in this program. Number one, we also wanted to make sure that the money that these people are getting circulates in their own economy. Why is that important? That is important because we will have just gone and bought unga and start distributing to those homes.
Yep.
But the minute you start also doing that, what do you do to the mamamboga who works in that area? You have also pushed that into vulnerability.
True.
So when you have an economic crisis, the first thing that you need to do is what we call create a consumptive environment. Let the people get some money so that they can spend in their own economy.
Yep.
You, Eric, if I give you money, an extra 10,000 or whatever it is, you probably will go out of town, and these guys spend their money where they live.
Bwana PS, are we to believe that you are offering us money?
Well, not
No?
not you, but
I hear everything that you're saying, Bona PS, and it makes a lot of sense. And yes, even from the very beginning, that makes a lot of sense in terms of these are vulnerable people, and you're looking at the very many vulnerable people, and the government needs to support them and also support the ecosystem and where they live. However, it comes back to the government knowing how many people are in need, and then therefore the government knowing how much to allocate. Because it sounds to me like the government started with a figure of 10 billion and then said, all right, so go and find the people who are going to get these 10 billion shillings. As opposed to the other way around. X number of people are likely to need this money. How much do we set aside? You'd have seen that maybe you'd have set aside more than 10 billion shillings to 15 or 20 billion.
So Eric, to your point, let's be very clear. Kazimtani is a very specific and targeted intervention. Mm-hmm. It is not the only intervention that government has put in place, right? Now, if you take the tourism sector, they have got their own intervention because there's hemorrhaging in tourism. They are not. I went to Kwale, that entire Diani stretch.
Yep.
Hotels shut down. I went to Mombasa, and the hotel I stayed, it was me and my assistant in a big 300-bed hotel. What happened to the waiters? What happened to all these young people who made their killing from? There is a program that is targeting the people in the tourism sector. There is another program.
That program, Bona PS, is actually, was it 2 billion shillings given to the hotel industry to shore up the hotel industry so that it can remain afloat. Now, we know, we've spoken to people in the sector, they haven't received that money yet. So that 2 billion shillings was never going to be able to pay the person who could have serviced you in that big hotel in Diani. That was going to the hotel owner to keep the bit of operation running.
So Eric, I cannot speak for someone else's docket where I don't have facts. So I think the fair thing to do is that you'll have to call the either the minister or the PS concerned so that they can be able to give you the actual specifics. But the point I'm trying to make is that we have a specific intervention in the urban areas, and this is what we were targeting. So that is very, very, very important. There are people who today, again, in some of these places, they receive a check. We call them the vulnerables from our social protection program. And we don't have to ask them what they do with their money or to work. That is another program that is there. There is the Inua Jamii program. There is a SME fund which is being launched by His Excellency himself, where in this financial year, there's 3 billion that has been set up, and to support the SMEs. There is the payroll cut that we have to make, so that we make sure that even those who are employed, the employers, don't fire them. This is a huge program that cannot be sorted out. I mean, a huge challenge that cannot be sorted out by one program. So Kazimtani was very specific to informal settlements, all right, and to young people, and with between 18 and 35, and with the only exception being women, that we gave an exception of the 35 cap, because there was a lot of single ladies and single mothers, single mothers who were having a lot of these challenges. So we made some of those exceptions.
But PS Charles Hinga, the PS in the State Department of Housing and Urban Development, we are speaking with him this morning on the issues of Kazimtani, understanding Kazimtani, the impact that Kazimtani has had in our communities, and especially in addressing the plight of the people who have lost their incomes and they need support, and they're receiving this very crucial support from the government. We'll also, after this short break, move the conversation as well into housing. He's a PS in charge of housing. We know that housing is one of the big four agenda of President Uhuru Kenyatta's in this term. We want to understand how far are we on this, and is it still on course? Does it make sense to still keep talking about housing as one of the big four? On the line with us is PS Charles Hinga. He's a Principal Secretary in the State Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is the State Department that's actually in charge of rolling out the Kazimtani program. As we understand, Kazimtani program is actually meant to be a social protection program that is sending money directly to the people who are vulnerable and in need, but not just giving them money, but also using this opportunity to keep them engaged, to ensure that we're improving sanitation services in our county, in our country, in our counties, and also to ensure that, and I think there's a very important aspect of it, that bit of ensuring that they are engaged in on a daily basis, especially the youth. The PS says just when they ran the pilot, among the things that they noticed is, one, there was serious reduction in crime rate because the people were gainfully employed. There was good camaraderie and good sense of belonging of the youth in their own country because they were engaged and they were getting paid on a daily basis. And this is why this program was then expanded. 10 billion shillings earmarked for all the counties in the country. This is going to run for 6.5 months. Already the program has, stabilized in terms of the delivery of service. City, you've got a question for the PS.
First, when you hear this, what I wonder is why the government doesn't state more obviously and loudly the things that it does, because this is really commendable. You hear Kazimtani, you see pictures of people sweeping, you think, okay. And yet, this is a very, very comprehensive program. Now, my question is this. Apart from the indicators that the PS has already mentioned, what are the other indicators of success for this program that you anticipate?
Thank you very much for that question. Now, the other thing that has happened, besides the crime rate going down, is that we are able also to assess every time we pay, because of our national government administration sector, we are also able to engage and check the impact on the economic side. So we know that it is actually having an impact on the economics. Second thing is that this phase 2, we said we are going to go into a little bit more sophisticated engagement. For example, the 11 days the young people are not working, we want to train them, we want to equip them for the new opportunities that are coming, which is now how do we sustain this program beyond 6.5 months. So we're training them on how to make roads, either using cobblestones or any other technologies that are out there, right? We are also training them on how to build houses or any facilities using stabilized soil blocks. So we have machines all over the country where we are training them. We also have the Ministry of Youth who are also engaging them on on platforms like Ajira, and how can they have all these programs for youth empowerment and so on and so forth, so that they can also be able to tap into these things. So it is quite comprehensive, that it is not just slashing grasses. Now, phase 2, we have now moved to what we call legacy type of projects. We're talking about issues like making roads. So if you go to Machakos here in Moa Road, we have got this pack of young people and women who are making a road using cobblestones. Fantastic. And because it's labor intensive, as opposed to giving that contract to one contractor, come with one machine and does the road. So we are departing from the contractor-driven type of contracting to what we're calling community-based organization or community contracting. So these are some of the opportunities that we are putting on the table. We are teaching them about urban agriculture. So you go to Lodwar along, River Tuckwell, the young people there are actually practicing urban agriculture so that they can be able to self-provide. We have the Ministry of Forestry, which has moved from just tree planting to tree growing. So a lot of these young people, beyond the 6.5 months, have actually secured gigs with the likes of the forestry to do the roads there and to start doing tree growing and so on and so forth. So I can go on and on and on and on. We have got young people in Moranga, in other places who are today, one of the biggest challenges in the informal settlement is ablution blocks. Mm-hmm. So they are being taught how to build toilets and ablution blocks. We have a particular program in Nairobi where we are upgrading all our markets. So this is something that you're going to be engaging the youth again. Uhuru Park, or what do you call it, Jogoo Road Market. Already, if you go there, we have stripped out the asbestos roof. We have replaced them. We are doing roads. We are doing drainage and connecting them to the sewer line and so on and so forth. And this is going to be expanded. So it is very comprehensive.
P.S. I hear all that you're saying, and I see all that is being done right now. And all of this came from what we can see in reality, all of this came about as a result of the pressures then that were put on youth when COVID came into being. But it seems to me that this is something that could actually be permanent in terms of providing employment for young people in the country, and as well as moving along projects that would have stalled for whatever reason. Is there some kind of forward thinking whereby we say that these programs could then have permanency in the country, even after COVID, for example?
Absolutely. And that is what I'm saying is that now for us to be able to do that, we have also got to, we don't want to set them up for failure, because also the public expects that, yes, you're cushioning people, but they also expect, because this is taxpayers' money, they also expect value for money. So it's very important that we equip them, we train them, all right, so that they can be able to take up these opportunities. So that is why we are saying in the 11 days, and this is totally voluntary, so they don't have to, okay, but those who want to, in the 11 days, there is a lot of training that is going on, and you choose what training you want to join. Because and the other thing, it also coincides with the amendments to the Public Procurement and Disposal Act, which now has introduced what we call community contracting. Yeah. So we want to move them into organized groups, and we give them work. There's something I just want to quickly clear, because if left unclear, then it's still causing a lot of issues. There was a particular case, which for me is a case of poor journalism in Eldoret last week. I'm not going to mention the media because you all know which media it is. And what happened in this case is that actually a journalist was involved in inciting the youth because they're clamoring for headlines. And they distort the truth. And because you know that bad news, there's a saying that says that bad news travels half the world before good news even takes the first step. They distorted the truth. They say that the young people are being paid 90 shillings a day as opposed to the 455. They could have just called us and fact-checked, because what happened in Eldoret, they started late in the program. So they started on Wednesday and they started on Thursday. Now, the way we are paying them is that we are paying the first week, and then we process, as they finish the second week, we start processing the payment. Now, so the first payment that the youth got was for week 1. Now, that payment, those who worked for 2 days, they got 910 shillings, and that is the correct amount they should get. Those who worked for 3 days got 1,365. So to distort the truth, to say that they worked 11 days and now they're being paid 9, 10, and that is how they get their mathematics of 90 shillings and whatever it is mischief.
Was this clear to the recipients, the youth themselves?
Absolutely, and that's why we are saying, if that was the case, there would have been riots in the entire country. So it's a case of incitement, and because this country of ours, we are very democratic, and all the noise that you see is good because we're very democratic. But even with that, there has to be some element of responsibility because if the country burns, it's our country, all right. And if it's burning because some journalist went and just was clamoring for headlines, it's actually unpatriotic in my view.
But let's be fair, Bonapiers. I think the journalist must have heard this from a disgruntled youth, which tells you that the person who was raising this issue had not understood. There was an issue of a breakdown in communication between the people who should have communicated to the recipients that this is what happens. If you work for a day, you'll get paid for a day. If you work for 2 days, you get paid for 2 days. And because you've started working today, Thursday, you will therefore receive this much. If this had been clear, then there'd be no issue at all. Nobody to be quoted by the so-called uncouth journalist.
Okay, fair enough. The only thing, though, that I'm saying is, Eric, always fact check, all right? So you can't take one side of the story, right?
Yeah.
And you don't fact check, all right? So, call us. We'll have explained to you. Then we're not gagging you, all right? You can still decide that your explanation is not good enough, and I'm going to publish my headlines of 90 shillings, money has been stolen, and so on and so forth. So for us to be able to, and the histories of this type of programs. We had NYS, we had those things we call Kazi Vijana, Pesa type of things. And when people hear 10 billion shillings, and then they hear this type of shenanigans are going on, it makes our work a total nightmare because we have put so many measures to ensure that this money is not going to be touched.
Yeah.
Right? So
fair enough.
And I'm not go and praise us. Do what you're doing.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Work should have been done by both sides. I think that is very clear. Work should have been done by the journalists and the editors, and also work should have been done by the people who are running the program. I want to ask the question about the 10 billion shillings stimulus package, because this is what you're running right now. And then you've also talked about the other elements of this project. There's a training aspect. There's the administrative aspect. There's the issue of, for example, of Moore Road that's being constructed and they're using cobblestones. Is this the same money that is doing everything? Or are you saying, for example, in the case of Moore, that the cobblestones and the rest are being bought by other money and the 10 billion is only going to pay the workers?
Very good question. The 10 billion is going towards wages. Now, we know, I'll give you an example, because in my state department, we are also in charge of all these urban institutions that we have set up. So we have just set up 59 municipalities. About 3 weeks ago, we transferred 9 billion to these municipalities. We're telling them, rethink, because yes, last year when you did the budget and your projection, you are going to do a road and you're going to get a contractor to come and do that. We're saying rethink it, rethink how you're going, because this 9 billion, you can complement it with this labor. We train the young people. Yes, maybe your timelines, because if of course you're digging, using djembes and all that, it's going to take a little bit long. But in this case, this is where we are saying it's okay, all right, not to finish as fast as possible, so that we can be able to spread this program and stretch it as far as we can. We have the Ministry of Education, which has got 7.9 billion for preparing for in January or February when the schools open. We need to have extra classrooms. So today, after this call at 11 o'clock, I'm having a meeting with the PS for education, because we're saying your 7.9 billion can be complemented by Kazimtani, because there's these young people that we are training. In Makueni, we've already started. Makueni, we're already doing 60 classrooms using the Kazimtani youth.
Yeah.
And we have trained them, and as I said, we've given them these stabilized soil blocks. So that is essentially, we are looking at the entire government and saying, how do we domicile this program in each and every one's work plan?
So why is the State Department for Housing the one that's spearheading this stimulus package?
Because we are in charge of urban areas. Informal settlements are our responsibility.
Okay.
But it is spearheading a multi-agency. So in our teams, we have got the Interior who assisted us with the recruitment. We have got Ministry of Youth who are providing supervisors. We have got the National Treasury. We have got the Infrastructure State Department, which is actually funding half of this program. And that's why we are saying half of it is going to be training the youth to do the road, because 5 billion is coming from the road maintenance and fuel levy.
So let's talk about housing as one of the big four. We know that from 2017, December, the president says, I have come up with the big four that's going to be like my main legacy projects. One of them is housing. Since then, we saw, for example, the recruitment at high level where PS Charles Hinga was recruited as PS to spearhead this program. And then since then, we've also seen in Nairobi, for example, a number of projects that were started there at various phases of completion. Just take us through, first of all, where we are at right now in terms of the big four agenda of housing. We wanted to have, the president wanted to have 500,000 houses constructed by 2022. How many do we have so far?
All right. So before we go to the how many, let me first of all say, because it was well documented. Now, if you're going to do 500,000 homes, you need 1.2 trillion shillings. Now, that 1.2 trillion shillings is not money that was in the budget, and never was this program meant to be funded from the exchequer or because we have got a lot of other competing programs that we understand that housing there are people who develop these houses and they're in the private sector. So we have to design a program where the private sector can continue doing what they do, but we shift focus from concentrating on the 3% of the population to the bulk of everybody else. Now, to do that, we had key interventions that we had to make. So, unlike maybe other big four agenda, you cannot just wake up in the morning and start building houses when you have not addressed the issues of land. When you have not addressed the issue, land in Nairobi now is the most expensive in the continent. There is a study that showed last year. You have to address issues of cost of construction. We have an obscenely high cost of construction. When we started this program, even our own ministry, when we did tenders, the cost of construction was somewhere like 70,000 per square meter. You can't have 70,000 per square meter and have affordability in the same sentence. We had too many processes that added another 15 to 20% of cost, procurement, taxes, and whatever that don't make sense, processes that don't make sense, and policies that are in conflict with each other. And then we had the issue of financing, both for the end user and also for the supplier. So you take time because you're addressing a systemic issue.
Yeah.
You cannot address systemic issues by just massaging things on top. You have to go to the bottom of it. Mm-hmm. Now, in the process, we wanted to create a housing fund. This housing fund was totally misunderstood, and maybe and rightfully so. We didn't explain ourselves. It's a very complex thing to try and break it down to someone is saying you're deducting me, but I might not be able to get a house and so on and so forth. And then we were faced with so many lawsuits. And again, same thing, people go to court and the courts never made any decisions. They just kept on postponing. 1 year down the road, they are postponing. So we decided to vacate the housing fund as a mandatory contribution, and we made it to be voluntary. Now, of course, that has an impact, because if you're trying to mobilize 1.2 trillion shillings and you made it voluntary, then you have now to pace yourself. Having said that, we have come up with an alternative where we have created an institution like Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company. We have gone to our local banks and we have told them, finance the developers to build these houses for 1 million, for 2 million, for 3 million, which is unheard of in this country. And they must be decent houses. But this mortgage refinance company will buy back those units from you, all right, and refinance you to go and and build another one. Now, this program has been funded by World Bank and Africa Development Bank, so, and we have already got the KMRC now is already established. I think there's just one step of their licensing with the CBK, because it is going to be regulated by CBK. Then we have also gone back to the same financial institutions and said, look, you're worried that this Mama Mboga, you think she has lumpy cash flows, and you think that she will at some point default. So what we want to tell you is that should you get to a point where they default and you have to recover the house, government is going to give you an insurance product. At the back of all those things, they've come back now, and I have in writing 338 billion shillings that they have now made available to say, anybody who wants a mortgage now, right? Instead of going to the housing fund, come to us. And then if you, as Eric, you go and you get a mortgage from the bank, you can be able to go and approach any of these developers. Now, what that has meant is that you've seen maybe the last 2-3 weeks, almost every week we are advertising. We've already got about 122,000 privately driven housing that have been published and are in different stages of implementation. We have got 28 projects that we advertised in the last couple of weeks all over the country, where now we are inviting investors and saying, it is come build these houses. We have already sorted out the buyers for you, and there are banks that are coming in between, so that you don't have to start thinking of Wanjiko and saying, but Wanjiko will not be able to pay me. So those are the structures that we have put in place. So we are now on an accelerated process, and we believe that with all the challenges that we have faced, that we are going to make some good progress on this particular pillar.
So in terms of viability then of this project, whereby we're looking at a certain number of units or, across board being built in the country by a certain date, it is still alive?
It's still alive. And so one of the things that is there right now, today I can be able to take you and tell you, here is a project coming up. We count all the way to 500, I think, and 16,000 already. Okay, we have already planned them. We already know where they're going to come up, and more are coming. So, for example, last week we finished the evaluation of probably the largest of all of them, which is going to be here in Syokimau. We have got 4,300 acres, and we have got 5 very strong investors who we are going to parcel out that 4,000 acres and do almost 200,000. And it is well served by two railway lines, SGR and meter gauge. There's going to be a highway that is going to be. So this is a massive undertaking. So this is now at the tail end. And this is investors coming to put in their money and piggybacking on all these interventions that we have put in place. So yes, it is moving. It may not have moved with the kind of pace that we wanted because of the challenges that I have mentioned, but it is alive. And by the way, guess what? Because we are facing an economic challenge, one of the best places to invest money, right, is in the construction sector. Why? Because of all the stimulating effect that it has. Look at all the downstream opportunities. 500,000 means that we need 48 million bags of cement. We need 18 tons of steel. It means I need almost 10,000 doors. It means I need 5,000 kgs of nails. When you break down these into small components, and then now we start engaging our own people. Let me give you an example. We have in Park Road, which is our first flagship project that we did, we decided that we are going to get those doors done by our Juakali. And we had 3 associations, Ngong Road, Kamukunji, and Kariobangi, coming together. We gave them an opportunity to do the 8,000 doors. That is almost 170 million that went directly to the Juakali. The effect that we have seen is that now these people formed a company. They formalized on their own without government telling them what to do. They have formed one of the biggest companies which employs about 10,000 people. They've made those doors. And guess what? We're very happy because 55 of them now have already have actually met the threshold to actually own those homes. That is the transformative power of these particular programs. So with all these challenges, we all must wish that these programs succeed, because it is not just about 4 walls and a roof. it is also about good economics.
P.S., from what I hear, would I be correct in saying that what you're referring to is what we sometimes refer to as social housing?
It's both. So we have got social housing. Social housing is targeting people who earn less than 20,000 shillings, and this is mainly in our informal settlements, Kibera, Mukuru, and so on and so forth. So in there we have got typologies that we have made, and we have reworked our financial engineering so that the person occupying those houses pays the same amount of money they're paying for a shack, but now pays for a decent house with water, with sanitation, and so on and so forth. So when you go to Kibera, we have houses where people are paying 2,500 for a one-roomed house. They're paying 4,500 for a two-roomed house, and they're paying 6,500 for a three-roomed house. And it is what is called tenant purchase scheme. So they pay for 20, 25 years, but it's the same money that they were paying for a barely 4 by 3 square meter one room shack, and that's the transformation. Now that is social housing. It's very targeted. Then you have got what we call low cost housing, which is for people earning between 20,000 and 50,000. That's where the majority of the workforce is, because 73% of all our formerly employed people are in that bracket. Again, what type of houses do you want? They can afford something like 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, where they can be able to pay 10,000 shillings or 15,000 shillings. Then you got to what is called mortgage gap. And why are we calling the mortgage gap? Because as it is right now, they cannot be able to get a mortgage. The bank will either ask them to put a huge deposit, or they will have to almost spend 60-70% of their disposable income on paying for this house. That's why we are calling them mortgage gap. That is the number between 50,000 to 150,000. Because in Kenya today, the sweet spot to get a mortgage, you must be earning 150,000 shillings. And guess what? That's less than 2% of our formerly employed Kenyans, those who can be able to walk into a bank. And that's why, for a population of 47 million people, we have, since independence, we have less than 25,000 mortgages. It's a systemic failure that we have to fix, and you have to fix all the issues, because if one piece is not working, it won't work.
Well, P.S., we want to thank you very much for speaking to us this morning. P.S. Charles Hinga is the Principal Secretary in the State Department of Housing and Urban Development. We've talked about housing, and I think the housing conversation is one that we must revisit so we can look at it in detail and see this is the plan, this is how far the government has gone, and this is where the private sector is playing in, and also how the people can benefit from this program. It sounds wonderful on paper. Now, it comes to the implementation, as usual, in the government, this is where the rubber meets the road. P.S. Charles Hinga, thank you very much for speaking to us. We wish you a very good day.
Thank you so much, Latif, and your crew for having me.
Thank you very much.
I look forward to coming back again. And I hope also you're not just going to talk about these programs. You must register Bomayangu, www.bomayangu.go.ke,
right,
and start a journey as well, so that you can be one of the converted and you speak from one.
So just a quick one. Once someone registers on bomayangu.go.ke,
yes, bomayangu.go.ke, then you can start the process of. There's a whole documentation that you need, but also you can start contributing. So you contribute just based on the size of your pocket. And because, houses take time, it takes 18 to 24 months to put up, because it's a big scheme. Park Road is the smallest, actually, that we have. It's going to take 18 to 24 months to build. You also end up building your own, arsenal of deposits,
right,
so that you can also lower your monthly payments. You can also pay through National Housing Corporation, the housing fund. Their banking details, I'm happy to share them with you once we are done, so that you can also be able to convey them to your listeners too.
We'll do that. Asante sana for speaking to us.
Thank you so much.